channels in here, so bear with me. All right, so welcome to the Sacrament podcast, the first of quite many. And the goal here is to discuss current topics, current things that we're working on or we're discussing that we are either discussing implementing in the game, talk about the possibility of implementing the game, and then if we've absolutely decided to kill certain things, then letting people know that we're not going to go with that. Like if somebody says, I want to make a fairy that sprinkles glitter dust everywhere she goes and then have the whole world painted in glitter, that idea might get rejected pretty quickly. And I'll be the first to let you know. But it will be done here. Probably on the forums as well, but here is kind of a collective thing. So, here we go. Says, answer any questions that have not been answered already. I don't think this is our first session, so we don't really have any of those yet. So, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask away. Until then, just a quick reiteration or a quick focus. Note that this will not be about the current releases that are coming out. That is a completely different podcast. That is specifically going to be done by Isildra and Czech over on Isildra's stream. And you can follow that every other Monday as we release each information release. The first one is going to be information release, I believe 9 is our next one on the books. Let me verify that because it's kind of important for me to know. 8. The next one on the books. Yes, it is. 8 is the next one on the books. So they are already in the process of studying and learning the information for that so that they can understand it better, ask questions, and inform everybody of what's going on with the game. So here we go. All right, so discussion points. We've been flirting with an idea almost since the absolute inception of this game, myself and the creators, about getting players more involved in the entirety of the game, right? So NPCs take up a lot of space as far as the simple things. Objects you're going to kill as long as you're not in PvP, quest givers, merchants, when it comes to the market house, the traders. All those things are typically done by NPCs because they can absolutely be controlled, and it's the simple reality of it. So one of the things we were talking about is we were talking about creating a game that everybody can get involved in, right? So if you don't enjoy PvE, PvP, crafting, you really love role playing, you could still have a home here in Sacrament, and that's the absolute goal. That is the end goal with this. And a part of that comes in, if you don't like any of those, if you really just want to trade stuff. And I know the conversation point is going to come to, what about farming, as far as actual farming, right? So planting crops, raising animals, stuff like that. And that stuff is absolutely something that we are still flirting with, and we haven't really released those kind of conversations for the public, only because we don't have enough people following right this second to really have a solid discussion about that. But some things we can absolutely have a solid discussion on. Some things we can absolutely start the input on and still get positive feedback. And let's be honest, right now we're very young. I think we've only been public to the community for about 4 months, 3 months, 3 or 4 months now. I don't know the exacts right this second, but a lot of this has to do with bringing in more people into the forums. And that's one of the other ideas here, is to show people, because a game developer can say all they want, that they want to bring the game to the players and let the players make decisions, but there's no proof of that anywhere. You get to the game launch, you realize the developers don't actually want that. They want to hear you gripe, moan, and complain, but they're only going to listen to anybody that agrees with them. So unless you agree with them, they don't really care what you have to say. And I'm not saying this is all developers, don't get me wrong, but this is enough out in the industry that we wanted to actually take the step in the other direction. We don't have a marketing team that tells me what I can and cannot say to the public. We have a Wicked who tells me what I can and cannot, or what I should and should not say to the public, but that's about it. And Wicked is essentially me, but white. I know I'm white. It's a joke among people that know me. I apologize. I shouldn't joke like that with most of you not having any idea who I am. So, player merchants. So this is the first topic of conversation I'm going to bring up. And so the player merchants is a way for players to get a little bit more involved in control of the community. And when I say control, I don't mean the bad kind of control. I just simply mean the type of control where players can actually be a part of it, where it's not just a background interaction. This is actually players now determining what items are up for sale, the value of the items, where players go to buy them. All of these things are now being determined by the players instead of just posting it to an auction house and forgetting about it until somebody else comes along. So it doesn't remove the auction house idea, and I think the auction house idea was absolutely brilliant. Don't get me wrong. I come from EQ1 where we started where you had, you would shout in each zone, and hopefully somebody sent you a message, but you had to find out what zone they saw you in. You had to find out what item they were talking about. I mean, you had to go through a series of conversations just to figure out what item you're trying to discuss and where you can meet up to buy it. Half the time only to find out that they thought it was a completely different item than it usually was. Like earrings in EQ1, a lot of times they had, 5 strength, 2 stamina, and the guy really wanted 5 stamina, 2 strength. And let me tell you, sometimes it could be a nightmare. So went from that to the bag trading system, the EC tunnel. It actually went to that very quickly because players were tired of that game and they wanted to kind of wrap everything up into one spot. So they put it in the EC tunnel, and essentially what would do is I would put my bag in your trade window. You could right click the bag and look at the items and decide if you want anything. It streamlined location, but there was still difficulty in searching for items you actually wanted. And there was so much chat going on that it was hard if you saw somebody actually looking to buy an item that you wanted to sell, or if you were trying to sell something or buy something and you saw somebody selling that item, you had to scroll and hopefully you catch up to the chat as it's scrolling past as well and find the person's name and make a response. And sometimes you wind up talking to the wrong player. So the next iteration of that was what WoW did, and that was the global auction house. Actually, I think I'm gonna have to do some research on that. I don't know if the bazaar came before the global auction house. I don't know what year the bazaar came in EQ1. But EQ1's next step was the bazaar, where you could list items through a bag, but your character had to stay in one place. They had to stay in the game. You couldn't log out, which meant that you either had to have a second account or you left your computer running while you were at work, and only while you were out of the game, not actively playing the game, I should say, you could sell items to other players. And then WoW came in with their global auction house where you could post the item and forget about it. So it took a lot of player interaction out of it, but it made it a lot more beneficial. Everything was there. You were able to use it. And it was an absolutely understood evolution of that system. But a lot of people over the last, 5-6 years have been complaining, and myself rightly so, that there's no more player interaction in this, right? So it's almost like the ATM scenario where you've got tellers over here and ATMs over here. Which one is a person more likely to go to? Some people, depending on who they are, will go to the ATM because they might be nervous around other people, or they want to pull out a set amount of money that they feel guilty pulling out, or there's 100 reasons psychologically why a person would choose an ATM or a teller. And it's really come down to personal preference. So we wanted to implement a system that plays on those. So we'll have a global, it won't be a global auction house the way that WoW does it. It's a completely different setup. It's actually in a different information release, so you can read about it then. But we're also going to have the player merchants. We're highly discussing the possibility of player merchants, I should say. Now, right now, we're thumbs up on this. We don't have any limitations on this at all. We don't see any major issues with this. But we want to see other people's concerns or ideas, because there could be a lot of stuff we're missing that we could add to this, that it would be rather upsetting if we found out from players after we launched the game, I would have loved to see this. Well, tell us now. Because instead of having to add it on later, we can embed it into a system now. And this is what these discussions are really about. These discussions are really about, number one, deciding if the player base wants to see it, right? If it's going to be too much trouble, we'll even put them up just to see if maybe one of the player base has an idea on how to make it simpler, because we don't know all the answers. There's no way for any group of people to know all the answers, right? This isn't a church. This is come together, everybody working together to try to solve issues and resolve things so that we can make a glorious game. And so here we come to player merchants, and we've got a few questions. Like some of the bigger questions is, how do we want to place the shops Do we want to put them on plots of land that players could buy right next to the house? Do we want to have plots of land or open warehouses in the cities that players can rent out? And those will be instanced or maybe not instanced, or maybe only a set amount of instances where players have to compete for those locations by bidding on them. I think ESO does that system right now. I'm not a fan of that system, but if the players are a fan of that system, then so be it. It doesn't really bother me. They can still head over to their housing if we put it in like that and have a personal shop. Um, this is I mean these are some of the questions that come into it, and these are some of the questions that we ask the player base and see if they've got any brilliant ideas or anything that hasn't been added to this. I would love to think of one, but I mean all of my ideas are either on this post right here or they're in my head, and I've already expressed them quite a bit with people. So Kill07 says, saw the tweets about traders, made me think of Night Online where players could just pitch a stall anywhere and set prices for items to sell. See, and that's a good idea too. And something we talked about was the capability to just kind of, put a lemonade stand up somewhere and just sell stuff right then and there. And then when you're done, pick the lemonade stand up, and move on. Go kill something in a dungeon, or go role play, go play your instrumentation, or whatever the case may be. In that regard, we have to be careful on where we allow, because if we put too many lemonade stands along the entrance to all these dungeons, is that going to turn players off? It might not. Players might want to see that kind of stuff. To be perfectly honest, it's a decent place to set up, but then you have the reality of, well, this dungeon has some really bad bosses in it, and we just got all these random merchants sitting outside the dungeon selling stuff. They're not afraid of anything. They're not in danger. I don't know. This doesn't really seem realistic here, and it's one of them areas where you have to be careful where you allow fantasy and realism to completely separate from themselves, and where players do expect a little bit of realism. Yes, we're talking about slinging out magic and whatnot, and there are absolutely tons of places where we can get away from the whole realistic factor, right? Like, we're not going to have players freezing when they go into the cold. We're just going to kind of assume that they're warming up through whatever means. Our lore master might come up with something for that now that I've said it to please all the lore heads out there. But we want to put things, as far as realism goes, we want to put things in the game that aren't going to put a much higher standard or bane on players, as opposed to eating food, right? You can carry food around in your bag, and we can put statistical properties on those food to help you get through other stuff, and it can be more of an additional thing. It doesn't have to be something that has to be done, but it doesn't force you to. You're not going to starve to death if you don't eat the food. You just won't gain the additional benefits for whatever reason. I think in EQ1, eating food gave you natural health regen. And then drinking water gave you natural mana regen. And that's essentially how those were handled. And me, as a bard, I never ran around with food or water. Water didn't help a bard anyways. And a necromancer was my other character. I didn't need water. My mana regen was through the damn roof. So who cared? I didn't play a character that needed regen on any of those aspects. So I never carried around food until way later. And the food wound up having like 150 to some stats, and I mean some really crazy numbers going out there. And in that regard, for rating purposes, I was carrying food. Once we're done rating, I'd put it back in the bank, and I'd get spammed with the "you are thirsty" and "you are hungry" messages over and over again. But that's a perfect example of a sense of realism we could put in a game that won't put a bane on players. And I think, with the putting down a lemonade stand outside of a dungeon, we could do it to a point where it's a set distance away, where the players can be assumed safe. Maybe put a guard post outside the dungeon or near around the area. Nothing major, nothing too interactive, but it's just a guard post so that we could say, all right, you want to buy potions, but you don't want to have to go all the way back to town or back over to that person's house to purchase the potions. Well, that's fine, because outside of all the major dungeons are, a bunch of lemonade stands where players are actively selling these things. You can make requests, and they'll craft them right there and sell them to you. And that kind of a thing is a really cool concept. It's something that could absolutely be used inside of the game. So head on over to the forums and take a look at at this particular player merchants post. All these specific things will have polls on them, more or less just to see where the players are sitting. If we get an abundant no's on anything, obviously we're going to back away from that. If a majority of the players say, "Oh hell nah," then the likelihood of us putting that in and saying, "Screw you guys, we don't really care what you say," is really slim. So, all right, so that is player merchants. And again, all of these things can be found, these two discussions right now can be found under general discussions on our forums. If you have any questions about any of the stuff that I'm talking about, please go ahead and ask the questions. And as I'm getting towards the end of each of the two topics, I've got two right now, that we go through, I will make sure to address the questions. For the majority of the time, I'll have two of my co-creators here to me help fielding questions in the chat, taking note of them, and then reading them off to me as we go through them, if they pertain specifically to this event. If they're simple questions like, will there be PvP, they'll probably just answer it in chat. It's not really something that I'm going to answer a million times on Twitch in a podcast, because people are going to get a little annoyed if I answer the same question way too many times. All right, so the next discussion, according to my lovely little piece of paper here, is on a concept that is, this has either got one or two people in it. It's a yes or a no. And you could say that about a lot of things, but this one seems to have a lot of people either a vehement yes or a vehement no. And there's not very many people who sit in the middle and say, I don't really care either way. And this one is on dual shielding. So the aspect of taking the weapon out of your hand altogether and using two shields. The idea is to create it's a bit more of a defensive stance. And we've got some really good ideas going on the forums already for it. Like Check here talks about one of the shields being more offensive based with defensive additives. So to be similar to having a sword, but your offense would decrease on an even level as your defense would decrease. And we're not talking about such an insane amount that players are going to be forced to dual shield. That's not what we want to do here. What we want to do here is provide players that want to dual shield. I've known quite a few. When I played EQ2, our main tank was a paladin, and he daydreamed and daydreamed and daydreamed. Must have theory crafted day after day about dual shielding. So putting up hard at work. No, you weren't. Putting up a second shield for him was really intriguing for him. And I'll tell you, it was an idea that stuck with me for a long time. And when Czech asked about it, it really just kind of clicked to me. We're creating this game. I'm creating this game. Why wouldn't I push for a dual shield? And I did. I pushed rather hard to my co-creators on the idea of dual shielding. That doesn't mean that this is absolutely going to be in the game. Keep in mind, if a majority of people, if we get 60,000 votes and 50,000 of them say no, this is stupid, it shouldn't happen, then it likely won't happen. I don't imagine that happening. I do imagine there being a rather close poll here. But a lot of people's concerns, I know from the jump, from people that I've spoken to already, is going to be the balancing issues. If you make it playable to where somebody can have two shields, then people are going to be forced to roll with two shields. And the balance comes on kind of a D&D setup. So D&D had, if you held a shield on, you got an AC boost. EQ1 was like that too. A lot of EQ1 rules come from D&D. So, but D&D was, by holding a shield, you had an AC boost. It was an automatic AC boost based on the type of shield you had. So their rules were, if you decided to pick up a second shield, you didn't get that boost twice because the boost didn't stack. They did have some rather unique toys, though. I've read certain abilities that were created by a lot of games. And keep in mind, when it comes to tabletop RPGing, you have to understand that the rules are really guidelines. The DM makes the rules, period. So there's a lot of unique mechanics that are added to this game that are well outside the rule book. And you just have to kind of take a look at these and take them for a grain of salt, because some DMs are very brave and very crazy. Some players are just, I mean, they're absolutely insane. Some of the stories I've read about different characters being created, a lot of times, or not a lot of times, but sometimes none of them make any sense, but they play very well. Or the character will be so overpowered just through natural character creation that the DM will have to create instances that will level that character out. And that's essentially what it really comes down to, is the balance. When it comes to creating your character, in an online world, we haven't quite figured out, and I say we, I mean everybody who's ever tried to create a game, we haven't quite figured out how to make it to where you can play any class you want, and that's where you start out with a blank character and you assign the abilities any way you want, and still release a quality enough game that people are capable of playing 100 different classes. What happens in that type of world is, you see, for a tank class, you have to roll this. For a healing class, you have to roll this. For a DPS class, you have to roll this. And if you're not rolling that, you're not a raider. You can't raid with anybody who's legitimately raiding. You're not on any competitive teams. And you get stuck in this mold where you're kind of screwed. So what the class system allows us to do, and what the dual shielding will allow us to do, or what the typical system allows us to do, is create classes that have their own balancing mechanics. And then we create fights that require certain elements of each individual class, so that there is no one that rules them all kind of thing. So with the dual shielding, what we have to be careful of is making sure that we don't create a weapon system that rules them all. And we don't want all paladins and all zealots, I believe, zealots, to feel like they have to dual shield. We want them to dual shield because they want to dual shield, because they're tired of sword and board and they want to use two shields. Now, if it winds up that, 90% of our paladin tanks are using dual shields, yes, we're going to look into it and make sure it's not underbalanced, but the likelihood, what we want to believe and what we're going to strive for, is the likelihood is that it's because they wanted to. It's not because they couldn't beat the raid unless they dual shielded, or they couldn't beat the boss for the dungeon unless they used dual shields. It's simply because they wanted to dual shield, because they wanted some extra perks, like a double bash, right, that might do more threat, no damage, but more threat. Or the system could even be balanced where if you are dual shielding, your threat generation, maybe you lose 5% of your total threat generation. So you have to work a little harder at threat generation, but you do have more survivability. So it comes down to the typical, and this is what you see all the time, is the give and take. What am I willing to give up to gain something? And is it worth it? Can I gain something because I'm good enough at generating threat in order to gain a little bit more defense? So it's these are the things that we have to consider, is the viability in solo, group, in raid combat, defense gains versus offense losses, and then the effectiveness. It has to be pretty, right? I mean, visually, let's be honest, over the last, 8 years, we've seen really pretty games that lack a lot. So visually, we're not absolutely focused on the most beautiful game out there. You're not going to get that from us. It may wind up being an absolutely gorgeous game. I don't know. That's really up to our art guys, right? But we're not so focused on that kind of visual, on that kind of beauty, as opposed to when you use the weapons, is it going to be the same exact maneuvers over and over again? Does it visually look appealing? When a tank's sitting there behind his forehead staring at his character swing these shields all day, is it the same animations over and over again? And that's what I mean when I say or visually, it has to be appealing. Right. So Kill says, so having things like shield bashing to add some offense to dual shielding. Interesting idea. And absolutely. And that's one of the things that I read in the specific, when I was trying to pitch this to my creators about dual shielding, it really came down to, well, has it ever even been done before? And as much as it absolutely doesn't get talked about, it seems to have been done in quite a few different cultures. And I show two examples here. My lore master, who is actually a historian nut, has actually looked up and found a few more references that I couldn't find. But while looking it up, you'd be surprised. Just go look up, is dual wielding viable? And I kid you not, you'll get about 50 different D&D forum pages that talk about dual wielding and its viability. And what you see a lot on there is people either bashing it or being absolutely for it. And those that are for it tend to come up with some really creative ability names, ability types, different ways to balance it out and make it enjoyable so it's not just two shields. Because when you think two shields, you think, the bash or a block. And that's really all you think comes out of it. But there is a lot more stuff that comes into this. There could be unique charges that are only there when you dual shield. There could be some, some taunt exchanges where you're passing threat off to another tank, but it can only happen if you're dual shielding. There's some really unique things that can come back and forth between that kind of thing. And that's what we aim for here. That's what this particular podcast every Friday is going to be about, is filling in discussions, letting people know what we're talking about, letting people see what we're doing, and getting feedback from people, getting information from people, getting people more involved in the game. Instead of watching and waiting for this game to be made, we want you here with us. We want you here helping us create this game. Because when it comes down to it, you're going to be really upset if we launch this game in 5 years and it's not what you thought, because you never once expressed what you thought it was going to be about. We don't want that. We want real gamers, not the trolls and the whiners, not those who are a little overly sensitive about every little thing. We want the real gamers to be here, to have a place they can call home again. And that starts with all of us chipping in and laying the foundation. So come with us, join us on our forums, and help us lay the foundation. All right, so I have a comment here from Crave. Correct. So Crave, one of the co-founders, states that all of our weapons are a matter of flavor. Dual shielding is no different. Absolutely. And that's what we're striving for. If you want to be a pally with a bow, give it a shot. If you want to be a ranger with dual shields, go for it. But the classes will certainly have a synergy with their weapons. And he's absolutely honest there. So the paladin is made as primarily a sword and board type class, right? The paladin does a lot of mitigation through blocking as well as his armor. But there's going to be a lot of times where you're not going to need that shield. So if you don't even want to use a single shield, if you want to be a bow-wielding paladin, our focus is to make it work. It may not be as viable as the sword and shield. And that's just the reality of it. Because essentially what you're doing at that point is you're giving up some defense to earn some offense. And we have to measure it out. And that's where the real balance occurs. It doesn't mean that you have to, become a completely crap tank just because you're using a bow to block with now instead of the full flat side of a shield. I mean, you'll still get some block percentage out of it, absolutely, because you're proficient in blocking, because you've been training in blocking. You can use a paper cup to block with, and well, I should stop there because that's not real. You can't block with a paper cup. You're gonna get your butt whooped. Don't nobody try to load a paper cup into the game. You're gonna get your butt whooped. You heard it from me. But the classes will certainly have a synergy with the weapons. A ranger with 2 shields is not going to be nearly as effective as a zealot doing it. Absolutely. Might even be gimping himself, but he is allowed to try it out. And that's what we're about here. We don't want you to feel like you have to go with the specific setup. If you want to be a zealot, which is our kind of holy tank, right? If you want to be a zealot and you want to use 2 wands instead of a shield, and you believe that the power of your self-heals can keep you alive or help keep you alive in raids, go for it. You might figure out how to do it. You may. It'll generate additional threat. I'll tell you that much. Healing always generates a high amount of threat, and it should. And we're not going to sit here and act like it's not going to. So you could absolutely use that to help build more threat, other abilities to build more threat, and then all of your abilities are threat-based. So you're removing a little bit of defense, but you're gaining some in healing in other areas. And that's where it's really going to be different for each player, right? Each player is going to see these abilities, and they're going to say, or these classes and the abilities that they come with, and they're going to say, oh, I can do this with that class. Maybe nobody else does it. Nobody else tries it. Maybe nobody else wants to do that. Maybe a lot of people want to be in the safe zone, right? So you'll see a lot of paladins with the shield and a sword because that's where they're comfortable at. But it's those other players that are really going to bring out the class system in this game, the ones that go well outside of their comfort zone. And a lot of those players are hardcore players, core and hardcore players. And there's a lot of casual players who maybe only get to play 4 times a week for an hour each time who play like that. And those are the players that they start out as the minority, and as other people see them doing these things, other people start to get creative, and other people start to get more things. And then people start coming to the forums and say, hey, I was trying to do this on my paladin. Is there any way we can add this kind of ability? And that's where it really starts to become our game. And when I say our, I don't mean Sacrament's game. I mean all of our game. And that's where the game starts to get really good. All right. Wolfenite. Holy smokes, I haven't seen you forever, Wolf. So Kill 7. Absolute brilliant comment. You certainly don't want to reach a point where class choice and weapon choice make no difference because everything is equal. Benefits and disadvantages help. Absolutely. Done are the days of the simple gaming. We want to bring back thinkers, and we're going to help you learn. If you've never played a game where you've had to think, we're going to help you learn how to think about it. And that's what this is all about. That's what Sacrament is all about. Pushing players to the edge of their capabilities and showing them that they're far better than they thought they could be. All right, so that is it. Does anybody have any questions as far as anything? At this point, this is live Q&A time. So this is, you can ask questions about anything. I figure I give 5-10 minutes to answer 2 or 3 questions about anything. I don't think, I mean, we're, you better be. We don't have that many people watching right now. So the first few episodes, I don't imagine there's going to be too many questions, and they'll probably be rather short. The goal here is about a half hour to an hour type episodes. If they wind up going longer, they wind up going longer. It doesn't bother me as long as it doesn't bother you. This stuff we'll be paying attention to. So again, even on these, if the podcasts are lacking in any area, if you expected to see something different, don't say gameplay because that's not what we do on this podcast. Please don't say gameplay. There are other people to do gameplay. It's just not ready yet. It will be there. Trust me, we will fill your brains and eyeballs with gameplay, gameplay, gameplay. You're not going to ever want to see gameplay because we're going to give it to you all the time. But if there's something else you want to see pertaining to the scope of this particular podcast, go on the forums and let me know. Absolutely let me know. I'll add it here. I mean, the idea here is to keep you guys in the know about what you want to know about. So, get in the know. So, I'm going to... I think we'll just assume there are no questions this time around. I think there's only like a 10-15 second delay, but there's no questions yet, and there's not really that many people watching this time, which is fine, absolutely fine. I expected like 2 people here, and I've got like 4 or 5. I don't even know how many are watching right now. So I don't feel bad for myself at all because this is exactly what I thought it was going to be. We got 6 people here. So make sure, for those of you that did show up and those of you that are watching this on YouTube or, the Twitch live or highlights, thank you for watching. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here, for attempting to be a part of something that's really ambitious, something that we're trying to do for the gamers because somebody had to do it, and I was tired of waiting for somebody else to do it. Make sure you go to the website at sacramentgame.com and subscribe. You can sign up for an account there. At the same time, our forums on the website as well. In the top left, it's the final tab. On the top, right. That is on the same website, but it is a third-party forum, so you will have to sign up for that as well. It's really quick and simple. There's nothing major to it. Also, if you're looking to volunteer for the game, you want to help out podcasts, you want to help with marketing, game development, art, design, lore, whatever the case may be, head on over to the website as well, and there's a place to volunteer. You can donate your time. You can also donate, you'll be able to donate your money there soon, but for right now, it's under donate and just donate your time. Right now, we're not accepting funds because of our Kickstarter coming up. I guess I should make a statement on that real quick. If you are looking to donate some money to this project, we will be utilizing Patreon soon, but after our Kickstarter comes through. And Kill 07, I will absolutely answer your question in a second here. I'll sneak it in at the end here. I'll find a way to do the live Q&A. I think I'll mention it before I do discussions next time. That way people know to ask the questions. Again, like us on Facebook. It is Sacrament New Gods. Follow us on Twitter at Sacrament Game. And make sure you tune in next week right after this question. I got Kill07 asked, would the idea of player-based traders be resource intensive on the servers? Is that a consideration in the decision? Did you briefly mention deciding on where player may be able to set up? Okay, so with our current server technology, no, it will absolutely not be resource intensive on the servers, not even remotely. And we'll get more into that when I have more information that I can openly share with you. But right now, we do have confidentiality things that we have to be careful of, and I don't want to ruin that relationship because it's an absolutely outstanding relationship right now. Is that consideration in the decision? Absolutely. All the time with servers. It's actually why we chose to go with the server technology, because it almost removed any concerns we have when it comes to considering things cluttering up the server. I mean any. We're talking about 90% of most games lag issues out there will not happen so long as we can get this server technology to absolutely function, and we have no reason to believe it won't. You did briefly mention where deciding on players may be able to set up. Yes, we did. And again, people may have ideas we haven't even thought of. So head over to the forums, put your ideas on there. Ask questions. Put your ideas. Share with your friends. Get their thoughts. You guys have more gamer buddies than we have. And that's not because we don't have any gamer buddies. That's just because there's way more of you than there are of us. Share this with your friends. You want your friends, you hear your friends sitting there bitching and moaning about a game, about what it's missing and whatnot, send them over to our website. Tell us about it. We'll make sure they get taken care of. Again, thank you for showing up. Thank you for watching this video. We appreciate your time. We crave your input. And tune in next week. I'll see you next time.